Thank you for joining us for the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays. I'm here with Jay Jones, and this is Text Driven Tuesday.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's it going?
It's going all right. How are you doing?
Not bad.
Yeah?
Yeah. Doing all right.
Yeah? Did your wife have a good Mother's Day?
It was okay.
Did you guys do anything for Mother's Day, or is it just kind of like...
My mom's out of town.
Yeah, I saw that.
She went to Disney World.
Mm.
And so, yeah, we ate with my dad.
Yeah.
Went to Ann's Country Kitchen. It's probably a bad choice.
Yeah?
It's great food. You been there?
I have not.
You should go. It's very good if you like country home cooking. But we got there. I thought we'd hang out after church. We'll talk a little bit. We'll be good. We'll miss the rush. We didn't miss the rush. We got there at like 1:25. I think we got seated around 2:30.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it was pretty slow service, so we didn't get out of there till about 4:00.
Wow.
Yeah. After that, went back, took a little nap. That's about it.
Okay.
Yeah. How about you?
As far as I know, it was fine for my wife. We went to Tu Familia.
Nice.
It's always crowded when you bring 6 people, but we got in. We arrived probably about the same time you arrived at your restaurant, but we got in pretty fast.
Got in quick.
Yep.
Is there a Tu Familia in the Medicine Park?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Haven't been to that one yet.
Yeah. Cool.
One in town's pretty good though. Yep.
Nice.
Went home, played a board game. That's good.
Well, you started my morning off with a little surprise when I walked in. I had some things going on, personal things that I'm trying to take care of this morning with vehicles and stuff like that. And you're like, have you seen the news?
That's never a good way to start a conversation, is it?
I have not seen the news, George. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And you was like, G3. G3's got an announcement.
Yep.
Pretty crazy announcement.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm on the mailing list for some reason. I've never been to G3. I don't know how I got on their mailing list, but I'm on their mailing list. So I got the email this morning, and then Philip sent me the link before I'd read it. Josh Buice, who was the president of G3, he was confronted by his elders last week, and then this week, I guess he resigned. I don't even know what day it is, Jay. What is today?
It's Monday.
I don't even know what the date. What is the date?
It's the 12th.
The 12th. Okay, so the 8th is when he resigned as the president of G3. But let me pull it up so that I don't say something incorrect. They released a statement. You can go online and see the statement, but it said that in recent weeks, the elders of his church uncovered irrefutable evidence that he has for the past 3 years operated at least 4 anonymous social media accounts, 2 anonymous email addresses, and 2 Substack platforms. These accounts were used to publicly and anonymously slander numerous Christian leaders, including faithful pastors, some of whom have spoken at G3 conferences, several of his own church's elders, which that's real bad, and others. And multiple times he's been asked over the last 2 years whether he had any connections to these accounts, and he always denied it.
What accounts did they say?
Didn't say. I have no idea.
That'll come out today, I'm sure.
4 anonymous social media accounts.
Yeah, I'm guessing Twitter
used to.
Twitter
Yeah,
accounts,
I'm sure to slander other pastors, including elders at his own church. It's wild stuff, man. It's weird. But what's really weird to me, and this is that I'm sure that we're going to see this all over Twitter, because you've got guys like Joel Webbon, who have actively encouraged their followers to create anon accounts to bully guys like Owen Strahan.
Yeah.
Which I've got disagreements with Owen Strahan for sure, but if you got something to say, put your face on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure that those guys will be pointing the finger at Josh Bison. Look, he's doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but trying to anonymously slandering your own elders. That's weird.
It is super weird.
That's really
Yeah.
weird. Yeah. So he resigned as the pastor of his church. He resigned as the president of G3, and G3 has canceled their 2025 conference.
Mm.
So if you're like Wayne, I've already booked all your tickets for that. You might want to look into that because G3 ain't happening this year.
When was that supposed to be? How far out?
When was that supposed to be? September.
Mm.
So
Too much caring of the online stuff, man. It's dangerous.
yeah. The social media is it's not great.
Yeah.
Too many people. Well, I don't know. I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but we've talked about the conference, like the celebrity pastor and the conference kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Like the whole conference circuit thing. But also people just going online and picking fights with guys that they don't know from Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Like why are you spending so much time going after this guy that you've never met? You probably will never meet. They're not in your church. They're not your pastor.
Yeah.
What they do at their church, you can disagree with it, but at the end of the day, it's not your church. Maybe that's just the Baptist in me coming out and being like, each local church is autonomous. So we can disagree with the way other churches function. We can try to safeguard our own church so that we don't fall into some of these things. But if it's not your church, then I don't think you should devote too much time to this stuff.
I just don't know how that people have this much time to be on Twitter all the time and making fake accounts and arguing about everything.
Right.
Like, when we're going through Romans, there have been a couple of key points that I think the Bible clearly teaches and have become points of controversy for whatever reason, it popped up. And I'm like, we just talked about this.
Yeah.
And I like, okay, I have to resist the urge to now argue with these complete strangers or with Leighton Flowers because like he was one of them.
Yeah.
Or William Lane Craig.
Uh-huh.
Now, could I do that and then get probably a bazillion new followers on Twitter?
Maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure, because I'd be arguing the counterpoint, which I think is clear in the Bible. But I'm like, I don't have the time or energy for that. Like I'm at home.
Yeah.
Do I want to spend my time at home or with my wife and my kids stuck on Twitter in a super long argument that's going to take 5 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's got time for that in their life?
Yeah.
Maybe if you're single, I don't know. There's probably better things you could do with your time.
Like find a wife.
Like most of these things, but you're gonna find people like arguing on Twitter. The church has been arguing about this stuff. For hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not gonna convince anybody, and you're probably all you're gonna do is gain some new followers.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever convinced. I used to argue on Facebook back when I was in seminary when I had more time.
Mm-hmm.
And I never like won people over to my position. It was just a waste of time.
Yeah.
And there were people that weren't in my church. Like, focus on your local church and focus on your local area and like build up your church, strengthen your church, find ways to serve in your church, encourage your pastors, study the Bible, pray, do evangelism. Like,
yeah, your life was not. I don't think like God made you to know everything that's going on.
To care
in the
about
world.
everything that's going on in every little corner of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of made in like a small community sense.
Right.
Like think about before the advent of all this stuff.
Mm.
Only people you'd interact with is like in the very recent past is people who you do pick up a phone and directly call.
Right.
And prior to that, it's people who you could write a letter to.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it was like people who you could take a horse and go see.
Mm.
Like I don't think it's not a healthy part of the human nature. And I think we see that a lot with the kids today, the youth. They're just aware of too much.
The youth?
The youth of our day, like, in their pocket of their hand, they're worrying about everything under the sun.
Right.
World War III, what's going on here, what's going on there.
What's everyone doing?
What's everyone around me doing?
Right.
And
it's
not healthy.
It's a futile grasp at omniscience.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
And we're creatures. We're not meant to have omniscience.
Yeah.
And it's just an overload.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a waste of time and energy.
Sounds like the commandment came home.
Yeah.
Of don't bear false witness, slander.
Yeah.
Eventually, it always does.
Yeah, and also, what is it in First Thessalonians? Is it First Thessalonians or Second Thessalonians?
What are you referring to?
Live a quiet life.
Oh yeah, live a peaceful and quiet life.
Yeah.
That's not radical, George. That's not a culture changer. You're not a societal changer, George, if you believe that.
Yeah, well.
Live a peaceful, quiet life, dignified in every way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it not Timothy?
No, it's First Thessalonians. Aspire, like, let that be your goal. Right? Aspire to live quietly and to mind your own affairs and to work with your hands as we instructed you so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one.
Yeah, so that's maybe one of the bad things. Now this will be used by the outsiders.
Oh, yeah.
Non-Christians. So there's another thing against the church.
So it's already blown up on social media. And I straight into the comment section, Jay, just to see what was going on. And someone said, I think that this is, in my humble opinion, this is worse than Steve Lawson.
Okay.
Like, you sure about that?
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Maybe delete that. I ran across this, Jay, switching topics before we get into Romans chapter 7. So this gives you time if you want to follow along. Open your Bible to Romans chapter 7. We'll be in verses 7 through 12. But I ran across this. I didn't find the whole song, but I didn't spend a lot of time looking for the whole song. So this is just almost 2-minute clip for you. I sent this to Philip last week and asked when we were going to start singing this at Christ Fellowship. Put this in the rotation. So
all right.
let me play this for you.
Okay.
I have no idea I don't know what church this is, but I think you'll like this one, Jay.
You tell me when to turn it up. I'll
go
be ready.
go for it.
All right, I'm ready.
Click it on the screen. Here we go. No, we won't.
Hey, we just had it.
Just kidding. Yeah, I know. Let's see. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Let's try it now.
God bless the Christian. God bless the atheist. God bless the Muslim. God bless the rest of us. We've got no idea what we're doing. We'll never make it on our own. We've got too much dark inside of us. We'll never make it on our own. Keep us all close. Every one of us close. Don't let anyone go. Let all our friends in and all our enemies, all of our children, all of our families. We've got no idea what we're doing. We've tried to find you
What is happening?
throughout the centuries. Different religions in different countries. We've got no idea what we're doing.
It's crazy.
We've got no
idea what we're doing here.
what we're doing. Keep us all close. Don't let
Well-
anyone go.
My first thoughts are
There you
I gotta
go.
say thank you, George,
Uh-huh.
for getting that Kanye West song out of my head.
Okay. All right. That's good.
Now there's
I saw you jamming over
Now
there.
there's a different song
Yeah,
stuck in
yeah.
my head.
Can you imagine just
Is this a
Sing-
a
singing-
Unitarian church?
singing at this church? We have no idea what we're doing.
We don't know what we're doing. Is this a Universalist church? What is this?
I don't know.
It's got to be a Universalist church.
I'll see if I can find. I'll see.
You
if I
don't
can
you
fi-
don't have to find
I'll
it.
see if I can find something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I bet it is.
Yeah.
Either that or it's a it may be a Methodist church.
Right.
One of the liberal because it's not liturgical enough for me to say this is a PCUSA church, you know what I mean? So it's got to be one of those.
Yeah. We've got no idea what we're doing.
That's how I feel
So many different religions all over the world. We've got no idea what we're doing. If only we had some instruction, maybe. If we had some teaching.
I will
maybe
say-
if we had a book.
Sometimes I feel like that when I'm sitting down to try to outline the text and get my next sermon.
Mm,
You ever feel like that? I don't know what I'm doing here.
absolutely.
What am I doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it starts. That's the stages.
Uh-huh.
Start.
Yeah, you start with should I find a different job?
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to support my family? I have to stand up in front of people and try to explain this, and I have no clue.
Yeah. That's how it starts. But
Mhm.
thank God that's not
That's not how it ends.
that's not how it ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an emotional roller coaster to go through the week.
It is. Yeah, it's filled with twists and turns.
Yeah, yeah.
You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're in Romans chapter 7.
Yeah. George, what's the longest you've ever gone where you're like, I don't have a sermon yet. I don't have a sermon yet. I'm in trouble.
I've at least Friday.
Yeah.
There's been times on Saturday where I've still been like, this is not. I still don't feel like it's where it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have had a Friday. I've had Fridays before where I was like, I'm still not even sure if this is the outline that I should be using.
Yeah. 90% of the time I'm good to go. I'm rapping by Friday. Like I'd say 98% completion.
Mm.
And then on the rare occasion though, like it's crisis mode where I'm like, okay, I understand this stuff. I don't know how to present it.
Yeah.
And that's when it can get tough. Because you don't want to just get up there and be a lecturer.
Right.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Like you could get up and be like, here's what this blah, here's a data dump.
Hmm.
But that's not a sermon.
Right.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into Romans.
Are you trying
18
to tell me something about
18
this
minutes
sermon that you
in.
preached?
Well, I did change the outline.
Did you?
Yeah, because I initially, and it does kind of work, but I was going to do like a threefold use of the law outline,
Okay.
which I think can work, but it ends up being a little more topical of a sermon, and also you're bringing in an emphasis. You're placing an emphasis on the third use. If you do that, that's not really explicitly the intent of what was said,
Yeah.
though it's true
Mm-hmm.
and it works. So I didn't go with that. I scrapped that.
Okay.
And went with the one we had. So.
Yeah. All right. Well. All right. Well, Romans chapter 7, verses 7 through 12, and we're going to be talking about the law today.
Mm.
Yeah. So some interesting things that you brought out. Some interesting things I think that popped into my head as I was listening.
Yeah.
That we can talk about. But why are we talking about the law now?
Well, he's been presenting the gospel, right, the way that he does, and the way he presents it, it shows that there's a strong link between sin and death and the law. And so far, he's been saying a lot of things that could be perceived as only negative about the law. Now, he does have things to say in that angle about in a negative sense. Like if you're using the law to make yourself righteous for God, well, then of course he's only going to have negative things to say. But I think he's aware. We have to understand. And I actually Saturday I had an idea to look at every hypothetical objection that he raises in Romans and answers. Now, why is he doing that? Because he's encountered them in his ministry before. He's been a Christian now for, I believe, around 30 years,
Okay.
is what people estimate, which will play into next week as we're looking at what's going on. But so there's nothing new under the sun. So he knows when he goes and he's preaching the gospel, these hypothetical objections he'll raise and then he'll answer them. And one of them is that people will come to the wrong conclusion about what he's saying about the law. And that is, he raises it in verse 7, what then shall we say? That the law is sin. So there's another one. So it is interesting to think about these objections in this sense, that you could do a test. Like if I'm a seminary guy coming out of seminary and I've hashed out my theology, or maybe I'm not, maybe I'm just committed Bible scholar that's a layman, and I have formed my theology. Well, how can I test that theology to see if it's correct? Well, one way you could do that is if people could not raise these objections in Romans against you, then you automatically know you don't have the correct theology. Right? And so if the way we're presenting the gospel doesn't, at least on first glance, make people go, maybe the law isn't good, maybe there's a problem with the law, then maybe we're doing it wrong. This becomes very interesting to me when we get into chapter 9.
Yeah.
Because I've had people yell those objections at me. I have told you before.
Yeah.
I was at an army school and riding in the back of a car, and there was a guy who was from a Nazarene background. He yelled at me the Romans objections. And I literally said, do you realize you just yelled at me the objections from Romans 9? But it's made me think about how we preach the gospel. Like the way you preach the gospel should seem like such good news that they come to the conclusion you could be an antinomian. Are you an antinomian?
Right.
Or are you actually going even beyond that and saying the law itself is bad? It's sin. It produces bad in us. And that's what he's raising here. So you have a defense. This is a defense. It's not a lot of verses, but there's a lot of great truth in them. In 7 through 12, really in 7 through 13, but I'm going to use 13 as an intro to my text next week.
Right.
It's kind of like 13 just summarizes everything that we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
And he's going to speak very positively now about the law.
Yeah. This is your anti-Andy Stanley sermon.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. So far from it being, he says, certainly not. Absolutely not. And now he starts to make, and I think we can discern three positive assertions he makes about the law here.
Okay. And this will be helpful because I think that we can have a negative view of the law because we're in the new covenant. So there is a distinction going on, but there's not complete disunity between the law and the gospel. We need to keep those in their proper place.
Yeah.
And so this will hopefully be helpful for people as they think through that issue.
Absolutely.
So, well, let's have you read the passage.
Okay.
Romans 7 through 12, and then we'll jump into these three positive assertions concerning the law.
Okay. What shall we say? That the law is sin? By no means. Yet if it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin. For I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had said, you shall not covet. But sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, produced in me all kinds of covetousness. For apart from the law, sin lies dead. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin came alive and I died. The very commandment that promised life proved to be death to me. For sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good.
I don't know how Andy Stanley can say things like we have to unhitch from the Old Testament.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Without just jettisoning whatever you don't like from the New Testament also.
Yeah.
Like you just take out whatever you don't like.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense.
It's like red letter Christianity. Like only the words that are in red letters really have authority.
Yeah.
That's how he he kind of treats the Bible.
Right.
Like if it's not Jesus, then
Mm-hmm.
we can ignore it.
Yeah. I have no idea. Yeah, it's so essential, because as we've pointed out, like the Old Testament is really ultimately about Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and there are lessons. Paul clearly says that there are lessons in the Old Testament. They're for our use. They're for us.
Yeah.
And he tells Timothy that all Scripture is breathed out by God, profitable. He goes through that. And what is he referencing? Like the New Testament canon is not complete.
Right.
He's referencing the Old Testament. You be
Mhm.
raised in the Old Testament, which
Yeah.
train you for righteousness.
Right.
It's the law is, Paul will say other places, is, I reference it, it's our schoolmaster
Mm-hmm.
to lead us to Christ.
Galatians.
Yeah. And it's essential for the gospel. Like,
Mhm.
how do you know you need Christ apart from what's revealed in the Old Testament?
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
Like Jesus just drops in. Like there's a
Right.
principle at play when you're taking somebody the good news of salvation in Christ
Right.
that makes it good news, right?
And what did Jesus even come to do?
Yeah.
He didn't just come to show love and die on a cross.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did he even have to die on a cross?
Yeah.
Like, it's all connected to the law.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the law, then you don't understand what Jesus's life was about. But really, you don't understand what his death was about if you don't understand the law, because it's all tied to the law.
Yeah.
Do this and live.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's. So we're already speaking positively about the law, Jay.
Oh yeah.
We can just shut this whole thing down.
We're not antinomians
Yeah,
after all.
Right. But your outline is that there are 3 positive assertions concerning the law in these verses, and so let's look at these 3. The first one is that the law's purpose is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'll get to the law is good. The
Mhm.
law itself is good, but you
Mhm.
start with the law's purpose.
Yeah.
Like God's intention for the law is good,
Right. Yeah.
and that's verse 7.
Yeah. So verse 7, I think it's very easy to see and discern. Can the law is the law sin? Absolutely not. Why? If it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin. I wouldn't have known what it is to sin. He says covet here. I wouldn't have known what it is to covet if the law said you shall not covet.
Mhm.
So the law makes clear a transgression. Okay. It's not saying that sin doesn't exist, right, apart from the law. He's
Right.
already made that clear. You have to remember, like, this doesn't pop in from nowhere. What has he already said? He's already elaborated on the fact that even Gentiles who don't have the law show that the law is at operation within their conscience.
Right.
It's God's grace to society.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, as we'll look at it, that this is think about the grace of God. He could have not had the conscience operate in that way, in which case this world would look like Lord of the Flies.
Right.
So we can already see a good aspect, not only in how it reveals, in that it does restrain. And some people have called this the first use of the law that has a civil effect. So there's a power at operation within the conscience.
Right.
So we don't want to ever think that apart from the law being given, there was not sin in the world. He says Gentiles have the law, the Jews have the law explicitly, but what it shows is what is transgression. So what the Gentiles are kind of grasping at, they know they've transgressed some God, their conscience is bearing witness against them, but they aren't aware of who they're sinning against.
Hey, you brought this in at the end of the sermon,
Right.
but we could talk about it here.
Sure.
Since we're doing something different than preaching a sermon.
Yeah, sure.
Here. So you said that who
get to
said
this.
it? Because you've used it before.
It's a very good book. I'd recommend whoever, if you like to read, Daniel Block's written a great book.
That's
and
what it
it's
was,
actually
yeah.
about worship. The whole
Is
book
it
is
his
about worship.
is it his biblical theology of worship?
Yeah. It's called For the Glory of God.
Yeah.
But he says in there, the ancient Gentile nations were aware of 3 things. The gods are angry with them. Their sin has caused that anger, and they must do something to placate their wrath. At the same time, they don't know 3 things: which God is angry at them, what crime has provoked that anger, and what it will take to placate the wrath of God.
Right. And we see this across all the cultures,
Mhm.
across history.
Right.
is they know that there's, I mean, that the problem for the atheist is trying to explain why is religion so persistent in all the cultures across the world,
Right.
for all human history, like because people intrinsically know that there is a God,
Right.
and they know that something's wrong with the world, and they got something built into them that says something has to be done to make the God not angry with us anymore.
Everyone has that mechanism, right?
Right.
In the West, it looks different. It looks more like suppression and denial.
Hmm.
So we don't have various shrines and places of idol worship where you could placate like your conscience is hounding you that you can go and offer a sacrifice and do a thing.
Though there's still, though it's we've framed it with a scientific, boundaries, but it's still religion. It's just nature worship.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it is. I mean, look at the climate change stuff. They know that something is wrong with the world. They know something it's humans, and they know that they have to somehow placate nature.
Yeah. So atonement looks like getting paper straws,
Right.
and things like that.
Yeah. But it's still worship. It's still religion.
Yeah, getting involved in political activism
Mhm.
to atone for your ancestors' sins.
Right.
So there's no atonement ever.
Right.
Can never end.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it plays out differently in kind of America,
Yeah.
or in the West now. But the law, what he says is, it makes sin known. It makes it explicit. It defines it. Whereas before, you may have known that you have done something wrong. Now you explicitly know it. Like God has shown it forever, once for all time. Like when he spoke at Sinai, he made the moral law, which I really think I wrote this paper. It's one of the first papers I ever wrote. It's probably absolute garbage, but the principle was cool, and I was inspired by it by physicists looking for a universal law of everything, which they'll probably never find, but they'll keep searching to explain like how the universe works, to synthesize quantum mechanics with Einstein's theories. And so I started thinking about the moral law of God as like a universal constant, a governing principle that's inbuilt into the universe, because it's a reflection of who God is, right? So this universal law of everything, as it comes to humanity in the world, is God's moral law, and this law is in operation, and we know this because everyone dies, right? As he said back in chapter 5, that through Adam, death through sin came, and death spread to all men because all sin. So we can't say outside the parameters of the clearly defined law of sin given at Sinai that sin's not an operation, because it is. We all die, and that's his explanation in chapter 5. And so what we have is how can, and it's a clear and easy logic to track, how can the law be sin if the law's purpose is to make it explicit to you so that you would know how you have transgressed God? It's an easy principle to grasp, I think, and understand.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that he picks coveting. Well, we'll talk about that as we go to the next truth.
Yeah, and I don't think I really thought deeply about coveting until
Yeah.
this next point.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a Trojan horse built into the commands.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the last one, and so you might would think that's the least important, but it's almost like it's a
think
key.
I think it's I mean, you've got the big ones, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't lie, don't steal. And then people are they kind of just ignore don't covet.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like gossip,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
everyone gossips.
Yeah.
Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Like everyone covets. We'll talk about. All right. Well, let's talk.
Yeah,
Let's talk about it in a second.
Yeah,
the
but
second
an
point.
easy way to think about this is, like I said, I think the illustration I gave is, say you're visiting America from a foreign country, you rent a car, you're driving down the highway, it's 80 between here and Oklahoma City. You haven't seen a speed limit sign, you're driving 100 miles an hour. Now, everything in you says, I'm probably driving too fast, I'm zooming past everybody. And it feels a little dangerous because as I go around these turns, it feels reckless, maybe endangering me. I'm probably endangering other people. Probably shouldn't be doing this, but it's exciting. It's exciting. Have you ever drove 100 miles an hour?
I have.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the fastest you've ever driven, George?
That's probably the
You are a
fastest. That's probably
known transgressor.
yeah. That's probably the
Yeah.
probably the fastest.
I think the fastest I've ever gone, maybe it was in this confession. I'm sure my dad's listening.
Is this just group confession this morning?
In my
It was just a
94
Monday morning
Firebird, I was
confession?
probably like 17 years old, 18 years old. I think I drove 130 miles an hour,
All right.
and it was fun, my friend.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yeah.
You ever done that, Wayne? How fast you go on your motorcycle? Don't lie.
130.
130 on a motorcycle?
Wow.
I bet that was exhilarating.
Well, something that takes the fun out of it is the constant looking for like like highway patrol.
Right.
Like you don't want to get caught, and so there's kind of like this taint to the
your fun.
enjoyment, right?
Yeah. So, but part of it is the thrill of doing
That
something
is.
bad too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the next point. But say you say like, I don't know, I haven't seen a speed limit sign. I don't know what the speed limit is around here, or if there is one.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like I'm doing something I shouldn't. Then you get pulled over by highway patrol, and he's
Right.
like, "What are you doing? You're getting a massive ticket." And he goes, "Look right there. It's posted.
Yeah.
You didn't see it, but it's there. 80 miles an hour. Now your transgression is clearly defined, right? And you know." So, and as Paul's reasoning and his logic is very clear. The law can't be sin if God gave it to make it known, to
Mhm.
make it explicitly known to humanity
Right.
what a transgression of his law is.
Yeah.
Simple principle to
Yeah.
grasp.
So the problem is not the law from the outside. The problem is
Right.
the inside, right?
Mhm.
So the second positive assertion concerning the law is that the law proves your need of Christ, and that's verses 8 through 11.
Yeah. So I feel like as we read this, we might think the focus is on sin because of how much sin is referenced here. But I think if we try to read a little bit deeper into what he's saying, the end conclusion is where we get to, right? So sin is going to be twisting the law in this section. It's going to be doing things through us, through our nature, with the law. But it seems to me that God's design of the law actually wins out in the end.
Mm.
Because Paul is now talking, he's using personal pronouns, right, in the past tense. He's speaking about himself. So you have a regenerate, converted Paul reflecting back on what was happening in his own soul in regards to the sin and the law and where it led him. And so I think what we see here is the law actually functioning as God ultimately intends, which is to bring a person to the point where they say, I'm dead under the law. Like, I cannot fulfill the commandments. Because at one time, Paul is speaking, he speaks in Philippians chapter 3 in a very boastful way. I think that's what his attitude was before the power of the law came home in his own heart. He kept the law. He says, as to righteousness under the law, he has righteousness under the law, right? He's a Pharisee, so he has this very boastful attitude. But here he speaks very differently. So something happened. I think what happened here is the law proved to him his need of a righteousness that is not found in himself or found in trying to keep the law perfectly, but outside of himself. So it takes him to a place where he needs the mercy and grace of a God who justifies the ungodly.
Hmm.
So I think that's the thrust of this as we're looking here now at these passages. Yeah. So he speaks in the first person, but he speaks in the first person in such a way as to say this is true of all people who would seriously contemplate their own nature and seriously look into the law. And so two things really are brought out, I think. One is how terrible sin is, how it seizes opportunity, comes alive, deceives us, kills us, but also how the law, even in that, despite of that, can take us to the point where we realize we're dead under the law,
Right.
and I need help.
Yeah. So you talked about the second use of the law. Let's walk through the three uses of the law in the
Okay.
according to Reformed theologians for
All right.
the last 500 years.
So first use, which we alluded to earlier, was that it has a societal or civil aspect to it in that it has the ability and power to restrain sin and
Mhm.
evil in the world. That's the first use. I don't know how much in detail we want to go into in that, but and I can't remember where the illustration I used about.
It's like you don't have a bunch of people going around murdering because you've got the law that says do not murder, and here's the punishment for murder.
Yeah, yeah, and I can't remember where I was for various reasons a little distracted yesterday when I was preaching. I don't know. I don't know if how much I can share. You want me to share?
I wouldn't.
Is it an overshare?
I don't. I think it's an overshare.
If you want to ask me
Yeah,
personally,
I think it's an overshare.
if you want to ask me personally, why I was a
Yeah.
little distracted.
Hmm.
So I feel like my illustrations got out of order, maybe a little bit.
Okay.
You can ask me, and I'll tell you why I was a little distracted. All right, but a way to think about this: the goodness of God's law in its effect on society and its power to restrain evil is, I said, pretend you're alive in ancient Israel.
Hmm.
Like, okay, where do you pick where you want to live? You're moving, like, hey, honey, well, let's move to the Middle East.
No.
You got the surrounding nations of Israel. And what are they like? They're not great, right? They are filled with barbarism and violence and murder, human trafficking, slavery, child sacrifice. They're sacrificing babies, bestiality, homosexuality. And I don't know if this is when the person left. A guy left during the sermon yesterday. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what triggered. Maybe it was this. I don't no idea. But some of them are cannibals.
Yeah.
Like it's nightmare fuel.
You didn't mention the Giants.
Yeah. I
So
didn't
what?
remember.
That wasn't the reason why
Blood.
you walked out.
Blood drinking giants. So this is nightmare fuel, right? So you got a family, you're gonna move on it, or do you want to live under King David's rule?
Yeah.
Where David is enforcing God's law and there's justice and people are treated with dignity and equity and there's not child sacrifice. Like, so you can see already there is a restraining effect
Right.
on society. And our laws, think about our laws. America, where they make our laws, in the chamber, you got Moses with the tablets.
Right.
And I would argue that as the further away we get from our lawmakers making just laws that can connect to the Ten Commandments,
Yeah.
the more violent and unjust our society becomes.
Yeah. Maybe I should have saved that for later because now you're triggering one of my questions that I
really?
wrote down. Yeah. So maybe we'll come back to it when we get to
Okay.
the third point. So hold on to that. So the restraining effect of the law on society, that's the first use of the law. So
Yeah.
it's not just for believers, it's for society in general.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The second use of the law is what Paul is using here,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's revealing to him that he's a lawbreaker.
Yes. Yeah. So it some will just call it the theological use of the law. It's the law shows you your need of righteousness outside of yourself.
Right. And this is evangelism.
Yeah.
Right. This is the evangelistic use of the law.
So you need to use the law in pre-evangelism. So the gospel actually is good news, right? So if you've ever studied Way of the Master, that's what this is based off of. It's based off this use of the law. So a good explanation of that is if you go up, like say I come up to you, since you like to drive 100 miles an hour, and I said, George, I got good news for you, buddy. I paid your traffic fine, and you're like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, you had this traffic fine, and I paid it for you, and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And said, well, you were actually about to be arrested for reckless driving because you were driving 100 miles an hour and it was 40, and they were on their way to take you to jail, but I paid your fine. That's good news.
Mhm.
But if I just come up to you and I'm like, George, I paid your fine, you're like, what are you talking about? I'm not guilty. Right?
Right.
That's the way some people will present the gospel today. Hey, got good news for you.
God loves you.
God loves you.
Yeah.
Jesus died for your sins. And you're like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what sin is.
Yeah.
Right? What sin are you talking about? And who how's this good news?
Mm.
So the law drives home in our heart and shows us we're sinners. And the third use, which has been disagreement mainly between Luther and Calvin, though Luther isn't as hardcore as some people have made him out to be. So I remember researching this as I was looking at law gospel preaching. But in reformed world, the third use of the law is that it's beneficial for our sanctification.
Right.
It helps us. It's an assistant for us to help us to progressively be made more like Christ.
Yeah. Let's hold off talking about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about that in the third point, because I want to ask you about some stuff.
Mm.
Okay. All right. So the second use of the law is that it's revealing that we've got a big problem.
Yeah.
Right. And
Spurgeon said it this way. I mean, like, he's Spurgeon, right? He's better than me. If men do not understand the law, they will not feel they are sinners. And if they are not consciously sinners, they will never value the sin offering. There is no healing a man until the law has wounded him, no making him alive until the law has slain him. Better than what I could say. Probably took me 45 minutes to say that. He said it in a couple sentences.
Right. Probably muttered it in his sleep, and his wife wrote it down. But the problem's it's not primarily the law. The problem is sin.
Mm-hmm.
And when Paul is using this language of sin, it can almost seem like it's an outside force, but that's not what he's talking about.
Yeah, sin is personified for rhetorical effect, like for rhetorical power. But what you have to understand is he's talking about your nature as a non-believer, as an unregenerate man or woman, a person who's in Adam, right, who has inherited from Adam we use the word a depraved nature,
right,
a nature that is infected by sin. But what's at operation in here is you. Like, you're the one that is doing this with the law.
right.
This isn't a power being forced upon you externally. It's actually who you are. And who you are will twist the law, bend the law, and it'll provoke in you all kinds of things. But ultimately, the law will win the day in its converting power.
So he said, I wouldn't have known what coveting was unless I'd read the law that said, you shall not covet.
Mm-hmm.
But sin, it seizes that opportunity that the law gives and produces covetousness,
Right?
all kinds of covetousness,
Uh-huh.
right? So what's he talking about here?
So we talked about this last week a little bit. What verse was it in? Verse 5. For while we were living in the flesh, our sinful passions were aroused by the law. They were working our members to bear fruit for death. So when we are told in black and white, this is rebellion against God, something in us, in our sinful fallen nature, understands that, comprehends what transgression actually is, but we want to do it. There's maybe it excites our passions, is what he calls it.
Yeah,
it excites something in us, and we want to do what we're forbidden from doing. Right. So this goes all the way back, maybe even to the garden. Right. The command comes, but before Eve ever takes the fruit, something happens in her.
Yeah.
We talked about last week a little bit.
Yeah.
She starts to covet. A desire is aroused.
Right.
So before she actually commits the black and white act, something internal has happened already. A misplaced desire.
Yeah.
A wanting of
Which is what coveting is, right?
Yeah.
That's what you brought out.
Yeah.
Is that coveting is just desire misplaced.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because the word for covet just pretty much means desire. And the same words are used, so don't get confused when you see like Jesus using this word when he says, I greatly desired to eat this meal with you, talking about the Last Supper. That's a desire, that's a good thing. Or I greatly covet your prayers. You've heard people say that.
Yeah.
That's not bad coveting.
Right.
If I greatly desire that you pray for me, I need that. That's a good thing. It's a good desire. But the law defines the parameters of what where desires can be. And the 10th command clearly places it in the realm of your neighbor's things. So your neighbor's wife, livestock, property, things like that. And at its root, coveting and this misplaced desire also shows that, well, I don't know if we want to jump into that yet or not, but it gets us to where we understand we're violators of the other commands, because if we clearly meditate on it, if God says you shouldn't desire these things, there's something going on inside me in this moral calculus that says, but I actually can, and I actually don't believe God.
Right.
Right. I'm not trusting God and what he says. So I am dethroning God in order to indulge in my coveting.
Mm.
And so I'm breaking the first commandment as well.
Yeah, I was wondering if coveting might be the root of all the other 9.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, we talked about it last week on the podcast, that coveting is something it's different than the
Mhm.
others, because how can you know if someone is coveting?
Yeah.
Like you can hide it.
Yeah.
It's something that is going on purely inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
Now it will have outward effects,
Right.
but how do you legislate it?
Yeah.
How do you legislate coveting?
Yeah. And I think this is part of,
Like there's a lot of case laws in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But there's not really anything that is like you can't really legislate that, like the inward aspect of
Yeah.
coveting.
you can do it and no one can know,
Yeah.
right? You can fake all the others, or you can perform the externals of all of the others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is, Paul brings it out, because how do you break through to a person that's completely self-righteous under the law?
Right.
How are you going to break through to that guy? Because he's going to say, look at this, look at this, look at this. Like, I worship one God. I don't
Mhm.
make idols.
Right.
I keep the Sabbath. I don't take God's name in vain. I've always honored my father and mother. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a liar. I'm not a thief. I've never committed adultery.
Mm.
I've kept all the law. And then the last one comes, don't covet. Now they can say, I don't covet. But like if they're being honest with themselves in an examination,
Mm-hmm.
the 10th commandment is like deadly to
Right.
a self-righteous person. And it appears this is the part of the pre-conversion work that God was doing in Paul's life. He's boasting about himself, who he was as a Pharisee. That's the way he talked about himself before the law. But God breaks through with the one he can't fake,
Right.
the one that he knows in his heart that he is a transgressor of God's law.
Yeah.
And it takes him to this point where he has said like that the sin killed him through the law.
So that's an interesting idea. He says at the end of verse 8, apart from the law, sin lies dead. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin came alive and I died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So
What is that? What's that mean?
So it's like saying I could sin before this convicting power of the law came. I was able to live in sin, and it didn't bother me. Right? I could fool everyone else and fool myself. It wasn't awakened in my conscience. And it's not that he didn't sin, but to him, it's like it was dead. He thought it was alive. And in respects to righteousness, in that sense, he would have been dead. Right? But then there's a work that's going on where it's awakened, and now he understands that he actually sin isn't just doing these things that makes one a sin, but it's a matter of the heart.
Mm.
And he's convicted now that his heart is sin, right? Not and that's a big shift that I think takes place, but I think it's one that takes place in everyone that actually becomes a Christian. They stop looking at sin as merely a legal transaction with the law, like I broke that law, I sinned against God in this way, I did that, and God will forgive me, to now going, something's been awakened, and I realize it's me.
Mm. Yeah. I think also there's the aspect of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because we've talked about the fact that even unbelievers have a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even before I was Christian, I knew when I did something wrong that I did something wrong.
Right.
But you see it in the world. People try to suppress that. Like that's just a social. That's just social construct. It's you shouldn't feel bad about um, being promiscuous.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a cultural thing.
Right.
Like it's okay to sleep around.
Right.
But and that I think that's what he means by he was dead. Like sin was dead.
And he was alive. Like he's
Right.
living freely.
Right.
in
He's
this-
living because he doesn't feel condemned. But when the law comes,
Yes.
now you know I've broken it, and there actually is consequence to this.
Yeah. And the consequences is death.
Yeah.
Right. That's where he gets. That's how the sin through the law brings him to the point where he say, "It killed me."
Right.
Yeah.
And verse 10, the very commandment that promised life proved to be death to me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think you have to know your Old Testament to
Uh-huh.
understand what he's talking about, because I
Right.
think he's talking about blessings and curses,
Yes. Yeah.
because the law does promise life.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that goes all the way back to the garden.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Don't eat of this tree and live.
Yeah, you'll die if you eat it, but the unspoken flip side
Yeah.
is if you don't eat, you'll live forever.
Yeah. And similarly, as you pointed out to the people of Israel, the covenant blessings and cursings came, and they are do this and live in the land and prosper and be blessed. Don't do this and be expelled,
Mhm.
die.
Yeah.
So there's that inbuilt promise. And then the way as the people of Israel come back from captivity, it seems that the Pharisees had made this connection, which is the law was never meant to produce. That they began to believe, okay, well, if we were expelled from the land and we were cursed and experienced death for breaking the law, we'll keep the law perfectly and we'll attain eternal life.
Yeah.
And so they put all these external parameters around the law, all these things, so that they could, through the law, gain righteousness with God and have eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, exact opposite happened. It killed me.
Right.
It proved to me to be death.
And you can see this kind of frustration in the Old Testament
Mm-hmm.
that they can't keep it, not
Right.
perfectly.
Right.
Even after they come back from exile, you've got books like Nehemiah
Mm-hmm.
that ends with Nehemiah punching people and pulling their hair out because they just keep sinning.
Uh-huh.
And by the time you get to the end of Malachi, Malachi says that if the hearts of the fathers aren't turned to the children and the children to the father, I'm going to strike the land with a curse.
Mm-hmm.
The Old Testament ends with this dark idea
Yeah.
that it's impossible. Like
Mm.
this futility.
Mm-hmm.
It was so dark that some of the Jewish scribes even switched the verses around so that Malachi didn't end on such
Oh,
a dark note.
yeah.
So there's this futility that Paul is experiencing individually.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, exactly. But what did this for Paul was coveting,
Mm.
right? And it's interesting to also look at Jesus speaking to the man who's pretty self-righteous, the rich young ruler who thinks he's kept all of the law,
Mm-hmm.
and how Jesus he uses, it seems, the 10th command to reveal this man, though he says, I've kept all the other 9, which can be faked, hasn't kept the 10th because he loves money.
Mm-hmm.
He's coveting. He's coveting more and more, and he loves it. Of course, Jesus says you can't serve God and money. You can't have two gods.
Mm.
And so really we see that the coveting reveals he's a first commandment breaker. And if you're a first commandment breaker, you're probably going to break all the others.
Yeah.
Right. So his way to get through to him is to show him but he doesn't, we don't know what happened to him, but at that point in time, instead of falling on mercy and calling for forgiveness through Christ, he walks away sad. And hopefully nobody did that in our church yesterday. Hopefully people had an Apostle Paul type of experience.
Speaking of those social media posts where you want to argue,
Yeah.
but then you have to be like, it's a waste of time. I have someone on Facebook that posted this long post from some other guy and uses the rich young ruler as an example.
Mm.
the rich young ruler asked Jesus how he might be saved. And after a conversation, Jesus ultimately says, "Sell all you have and give it to the poor and follow me." In this request, in his time, he was essentially asking the young, wealthy ruler to abandon a system of economic exploitation and owning human beings as slaves and join a new community that shared everything in common and cared for all of one another's needs. Um, yeah, so
Certainly a novel take.
it's
Yeah.
it's just that Marxist view of the gospel.
Yeah.
It says liberation theology.
Yeah. I mean, so Jesus could have said, "Oh, what about coveting?"
All right.
And the guy would have probably gone, "I don't covet either."
Yeah.
And so instead he says, he just bypasses all of that and gets right to the problem, which
Right.
is his heart.
Yeah.
And shows him
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah. It's he's not this. He did not tell everyone to do this.
No.
There were rich people in the church.
Yeah.
If there weren't rich people in the church, then Paul wouldn't have written instructions to the rich people in the church.
Right.
Jesus is not telling every Christian give up everything and join a commune and just have communism.
Right. Yeah.
He's getting at the heart of this one man's sin, and his sin is coveting.
Yes. Yeah.
Which circles back to the first one.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out if the Ten Commandments were a chiasm, but I don't think they are.
No.
I was working on it yesterday while you
trying
were
to find-
preaching. I was like, are the Ten Commandments a chiasm? Yeah, I couldn't figure out how they would be paralleling each other, but they do. I do think the first and the 10th are bookends. I do think that they tie it all together.
Right. And so the 10th commandment, the power of it is it shows what's going on in the heart.
Yeah.
Like you said. And that's what Jesus is concerned with always, is what's not what we can show externally, but what's really going on in our heart. Because that from the heart, he says in Matthew 15, that's where everything comes from. That's where adultery, sexual immorality comes from. That's where hatred and murder, that's where everything emerges from the heart. And so the 10th command was that operation in Paul's life to bring him to that point, I think, of ultimately of despair, to where he would look for and be prepared for, I think, the gospel.
Right. Yeah. He also says that sin deceived him. What does he mean by that?
Yeah. So he's
in verse 11.
Yeah. I think he doesn't really elaborate on it too much. Sin seized an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. So we don't sin, right? Because we're looking at it and we're going, this is going to bring disastrous consequences into my life, right? There's a deception going on. So I think on a number of levels it operates. So I think I might have given 3. There's probably more if you think about it. But let's see. Let me get to it in my notes. It says first, that sin's going to make you happy, right? So we often believe incorrectly about the law. So we're going to tie in the law being good. God gives his law. It's a reflection of who he is. And because God is good, he cares about our well-being. So people don't view the law that way, but the law is given for humanity's well-being.
This is what the serpent was trying to attack.
Yeah.
God said you couldn't eat any of the trees.
Right.
He's trying to undermine the goodness of God and his law.
Yeah. And so we look at these 10 commandments. We shouldn't see them as like things that are going to kill our joy, but rather things that if we lived by them, and I would argue that even if a non-believer were to live by them, they would have a better life filled with more happiness and more joy and less strife and less pain. Now, I'm not at all implying that they're able to do that without the Spirit's power. But for instance, if you just think about it, it's easy to grasp. If you marry one person, you spend your whole life dedicated to that person in a real covenant of commitment to them. Your life is going to be filled with far less pain and trouble than a single man who sleeps around with however girls he wants,
Right.
and maybe has different children by different women, and now is paying child support.
Yeah.
And this plays out on a whole number of ways.
Well, if we even think about coveting, I mean, coveting really is rooted in uh, unthankfulness,
Right. You're
you know,
unthankful.
ingratitude.
You're not content
You're not content.
with God's providence in your life.
Right. The person who is constantly seeking to get more is not going to be as happy as the person who's content with whatever they have.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right. So
And
But-
this is what we see in Psalm 2. Like, why did the nations rage? That you've got the kings of the earth; they're gathering together, and they say, "Let us break their bond. You know, let us break Yahweh's bonds apart."
yeah.
Because they're seeing the law not as freedom; they're seeing it as chains.
Yes.
They've been handcuffed, so they can't do whatever they want to do,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
they want to break free of that.
Yeah, that's the way sin deceives you. It tells you, no, real happiness can be found by breaking the commands, by
Mhm.
living morally free, by
Mhm.
doing whatever you want, by writing your own rules.
Right.
And that's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a lie. But it's a lie we easily believe because
Right.
our fallen nature wants that.
Mhm.
Again, remember, this is your own sinful nature deceiving you through the law.
Yeah.
Not believing what God says.
Mhm.
But also it deceives and says there's not ultimate consequences,
Mm.
right? So if Satan in the first, when we're talking about the garden, with that first one is that true happiness will be found if you eat this fruit. God's holding out on you. There's more outside of God's law, more happiness to be found. This one says there's not real consequences. So you're not really going to die, which is what he says, right? No, you're not really going to die if you eat this.
Yeah, I was thinking of Psalm 10 when you were talking about that, because 3 times it says that the wicked says in his heart.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking to himself. He says in his heart, "I shall not be moved. Throughout all generations, I shall not meet adversity." He says in his heart, "God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He will never see it." And he says in his heart, "You will not call to account."
Yeah.
Like, that's the mindset of the wicked.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of Psalm 14 also. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God."
Yeah.
It's not saying that he's necessarily an atheist, but that he's a practical atheist. He
Right.
doesn't believe that God's going to hold him accountable for his actions.
Yeah, which is how it plays out a lot in our culture.
Yeah.
Right. People would say, "No, there's not really a God. There's not really any moral accountability, so I'll do what I want."
Mm.
Yeah. So sin deceives in that aspect, but it also can deceive you in thinking that you can keep the law.
Mm.
So sin could lie to you and tell you that righteousness is attainable through keeping this. And then, of course, what will end up happening is for minor infractions that, like, you might perceive for yourself, like coveting, you might stuff them down and say it's not really that big a deal.
Yeah.
And I can actually attain righteousness through keeping the law.
Mm.
But there's also another one, like you think about, and I might have mentioned it somewhere in the sermon, but sin is so sinister in your life, it can actually trick you into using the law to do bad things, right? So Paul is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
He's persecutor of the church
Mm.
before he's a Christian. He's wanting to arrest and imprison Christians and even have them killed under the law.
Right.
But even more so, I thought about yesterday, Jesus was killed under the law.
Right.
The people that killed him thought they were keeping the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so sin is so sinister. Will have you crucify the Messiah?
Yeah, it's so weird. You've got the story in Mark where the man with the what is it, dropsy? What is dropsy? I don't know what dropsy is. He has something wrong with his hand,
Yeah.
right? In the synagogue, it's the Sabbath, and Jesus is going to heal him, and the religious leaders are looking to see, is he going to heal this guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jesus says, "Is it better to save life or destroy life on the Sabbath?" And they don't say anything. He heals the guy, which restores this guy and probably makes all kinds of differences in his life and his being able to work. The religious leaders leave, and plot how they can destroy Jesus
Mm-hmm.
on the Sabbath. So they think that they're keeping the Sabbath by Jesus not healing a guy, but they don't see the irony of plotting to kill Jesus on the Sabbath.
Right.
But they think that they're keeping the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Right. Yeah. So the law can deceive us.
Yeah.
And that's what we brought out.
All right. So the law proves your need for Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Now, verse 12. The law is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I have a couple of things that I want to bring up.
Okay.
All right.
So Romans 7:12. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good.
You can't get any more
Yeah.
plain than that.
Yeah. Exactly. The law comes from God and is a reflection of His character and nature.
Mm.
So this is not an arbitrary thing.
Right.
So as God is perfect, what He gives in His law is perfect. It's a reflection of who He is, and He gives kind of three brackets for us to hang on to: holy, righteous, or just, and good. So I like what John Murray says. He says, As holy, the law reflects the transcendence and purity of God and demands of us the same consecration of that purity. And that's what we constantly hear, right? Be holy as I am holy. And the law is given to show us what is that standard.
Mm-hmm.
And all through the Psalms, you're going to hear language like this speaking about the holiness of God's law, the righteousness of God's law, and the goodness, the moral goodness of God's law.
Right.
All through the Psalms.
Yeah. So the law is not arbitrary.
Right.
It's not as if God could have said something else.
Right. Which, I don't know if you have heard people kind of debate this thing,
Mhm.
like why are they those laws?
Right.
Right. Are they those laws because God's picking out these qualities of things which are just good that exist in the universe for who knows why, like, physical laws, and He's saying, like, these laws are good, do these things? Or could He have picked something else? So the question is, does He pick the law because those laws are good, or are the laws good because He gave them?
Mm.
So if it's the second sense, then He could have commanded something else, and that something else would have been a good thing.
Right.
So he could have made a hypothetically, if God would have said, you shall lie, then that would have been good.
Yeah.
But the answer is not. It's not
Yeah.
either of those.
Right.
They are what they are because this is who God is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? God's not a liar.
Right.
He can't lie. And so there's a commandment for us to reflect His character and nature.
Right.
He's not a murderer. He's just. So there's a commandment that we don't murder. Right? So these things that God commands they're not arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
They are a reflection of who He is.
Right.
So they are universal in the sense that they always exist, but they always exist because they're a character of the reflection of God,
Mm-hmm.
of His character and nature. So.
Yeah. Right. They're righteous,
Mm-hmm.
which you brought out is really aiming at justness.
Yeah.
That's just.
That they're just.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're fair. It's fair, completely fair and
Mhm.
equitable.
You brought out that interesting court case. I saw that in the UK when
Oh,
they
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to have the two tiers.
Yeah, they were debating it, and it was part of their. I guess they have a sentencing committee or board.
Who knows the weird things that they do over in England? There's a reason why we
But it had
rebelled.
had a potential to set up a 2-tier justice system.
Right. Yeah.
One for white people, people I guess that are natives,
Yeah.
and then one for minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that sense, there's not really equity under the law.
Yeah. It's weird. It seems like something that will be suggested in America soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, well, they were raised in the ghetto, so they aren't responsible like a white person is.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. You look at Exodus 23, verse 3, and it says, "You shall not be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit."
Yeah. Exactly. And,
Like, just because he's poor doesn't mean that he should be shown favoritism.
right.
But that's exactly what we see in
Mhm.
our own judicial system
Right.
nowadays.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So under the law, there's complete justice. It's
Right.
completely fair. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor.
Yeah. Yeah, verse 6 says, "You shall not pervert justice due to your poor," in his lawsuit.
Yeah.
So the rich person shouldn't be shown favoritism, and the poor person shouldn't be shown favoritism. What's the law say? Like, what did they do?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like that is true justice and equity.
Yeah.
But all we're doing is, and it's all part of the Marxist mentality
Right.
of rising up. The proletariat has to rise up and supplant the bourgeoisie. It's just the same thing in a social context. The poor and oppressed have to rise up over the rich and privileged,
Yeah.
and that's just injustice on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
It's just flipping back to the other side.
Yeah.
But God's law is not like that.
Right.
It's actually just.
Yes.
It's actually fair.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. God doesn't show partiality,
Right.
and neither does the law.
Yeah. And it's good.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's good. Look, John Murray again, he says, as good, the law promotes the highest well-being and thus expresses the goodness of God.
Mm.
So it's promoting our well-being.
Yeah.
As we already talked about, it gives us a blueprint for really human thriving and blessing.
Yeah.
And so it's good. It would be good. Again, if you think back to, I remember reading through the Old Testament the first time after I was a believer, and I can remember it vividly because I was actually in the field in the army for like 2 weeks. And so I'd read when I had a break. Got done reading through portions of the Old Testament, and I thought, man, like, I had no idea. Like, God's law is really good.
Yeah.
Like, if you lived in a society like this,
Yeah.
there'd be a whole lot less human suffering, a whole lot less crime. Like, it would be a good place to live.
Is that Christian nationalism, Jay?
Um,
We've talked about this before, but I always think it's important to bring this stuff up when it arises, because there's so much debate over Christian nationalism. It's bad. We should oppose it. I feel comfortable calling myself a Christian nationalist. Now it needs to be defined, because there's all kinds of different Christian nationalists out there that have different ideas.
I don't know that you should take the term Christian nationalist because of how it's been weaponized. And by that, when people hear it, what they hear is that you're a white supremacist and you're a bigot and you're a homophobe and like you want to force everyone to become a Christian.
Yeah.
That's the way it's been weaponized and will be weaponized, and it will continue to grow. It's better, I think, just to say that you're a Christian.
Yeah.
Right. And that we can see that there is a goodness to God's law. And so if we live in a society where you're able to lobby legislatures, why would you not lobby for something that's more just?
Yeah.
Right? Something that will promote human thriving.
Yeah.
But you can fall into the other spectrum to where you become completely engrossed in the political world, where you think if we could do this first, then the culture would change.
Right.
Right. And I don't think that's the pursuit. I don't think it should be the main pursuit. The main pursuit should be in wherever you're at, it should be here. So maybe start local and then expand, pursuing righteous and just legislation.
Yeah.
That promotes human flourishing and human thriving.
Yeah.
Because you care about the betterment. If you love your neighbor, right, you want just laws. Just laws promote your neighbor, right? And just because the non-believing world can't see that doesn't mean that's not a worthy thing to pursue.
Yeah.
But we should know it's not going to convert the country.
Right. Right.
You could enact in America, and history proves this to be true, by the way. Like you could, like they had in England. They had a church state in England. They had a king over the church, even. What was that like? Was it great? Was it a utopia?
No. And it swung back and forth
It
depending on who the
Who was
king or
in
the queen
power.
was, who's in power.
Right. So
Yeah.
you're good to preach the gospel now.
Well, you can see it.
New person comes in power, and now you're about to be burned to death for what you've been preaching.
Right. You can see it with slavery and abortion.
Right.
Slavery, which was evil in America, was abolished, but it didn't change the hearts of people who had racism
Mm-hmm. Right.
that viewed black people as inferior humans.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't change it.
Right.
Was it better that slavery was abolished?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for the culture, but it didn't change people's hearts.
Right.
Abortion should be abolished,
Right.
not regulated. It should actually be done away with, because that's better. That is God's law.
Right.
But it's not going to change people's hearts, and we see that because of Roe versus Wade being overturned, and you can't get a medical abortion here in Oklahoma, but that hasn't changed people's hearts. They just go across the border to Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
or they just get the Plan B pill. So yes, God's law should be put into our culture, but that's not going to bring mass conversion.
Right.
Right.
And I think also we should understand that in a country such as ours, where we have these freedoms and these political type freedoms to lobby and to push for laws and things like that, we can see that the church should be involved in a prophetic sense
Mhm.
in calling legislatures to do what is right and just.
Right.
Now, I think it's a different scenario like in the early church where you don't have that, right? And as is the case for many Christians all over the world. In that sense, I think we see the gospel operating like an insurgency, like in the, I don't want to use the word shadows for the dark connotation, but in the shadows of society. The gospel is undermining the system from the ground up.
Right.
And what I worry about in America is churches abandoning that, because we'll always, that's who we are, right? We're the people who change society from the ground up through the gospel. And
Right.
it undermines those in
From the
political-
roots, right?
Yeah. It undermines those in political power that would be opposed to the gospel. So what I worry about in America is that churches would get involved in the politics so much that they lose their the urgency of the gospel in their immediate context.
So it's being more concerned with the political landscape than conversion.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because if God gives grace and he blesses, and I think we can see this even in history. I can't remember the exact revival that happened in Scotland, but there was a revival in Scotland where, like, think about this, the entire northern region of Great Britain, like, didn't need police anymore. How'd that happen? That didn't happen through laws. That happened because there was a real revival and mass conversions.
Wow.
And so it had impacted society that people were living out the law without being forced to.
Yeah.
So, I think we should always be when we have the freedoms we have, we should be promoting laws that can be connected to God's moral law, the 10 Commandments, which, by the way, Moses and the 10 Commandments is in
Right.
Congress.
Yeah.
Showing, I think, that the founders in the early parts of our nation understood that our laws should be made that are connected to, in at least some sense, God's moral law.
Yeah. Somewhere along the lines, I think that we've made an idol out of multiculturalism, as if, and we've talked about this before, as if every culture is equally good, which is just not the case. But that's the argument that's being made. Like that's why colonialism has been a slur.
Right,
Like
you're right.
you white colonialists just want to come in and supplant the culture of the people who are already here. Well, the people who are already here owned slaves and were cannibals and went to war, and they were pagans.
Yeah.
They had human sacrifices. They were not the tree huggers that you see in like Disney's Pocahontas. Right? They weren't all peace loving people.
Right.
The peace-loving people usually were enslaved by the warmongers.
Right.
So when Christianity came in and supplanted that culture, Christianity is superior to that.
Right.
And I think that a lot of Christians are embarrassed to
Yeah.
think that way.
Yeah.
We don't have to be. Christianity is superior to pagan cultures.
Yeah. Prime example in India, when if your husband dies before you, do they burn the wife to death on the husband?
Is that illegal now? I thought that they outlawed that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Oh yeah, because of Christianity.
because of Christianity, like the early Christian missionaries are going there and they're like, hey, you should not burn the widow to death
Right.
with the husband
Yeah.
who died.
Yeah.
It's immoral.
Yeah.
Well, that's an example of a superior moral culture coming and supplanting a
Yeah.
less superior.
And people look at it as a race thing, like it's white people that are doing all this, it's Europeans that are doing all of this, but it's rooted in the Jewish law.
Right.
It's rooted in Middle Eastern religion.
Yeah.
Like Christianity came out of Israel.
Right.
It just, in God's providence, it just moved to the West, where there were white people.
Right.
But it's not. This is not, and we need to be careful not to confuse the two. It's not European culture that is superior because it's European. It's Christian. It's Christianity that's influenced culture. That's why it can. That's why it's superior.
Right.
It's not. Let's make everyone European. It's let's Christianize the world.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, a prime example, people say, well, you can't force Christianity on me. You can't force me to obey these laws that are religious.
Yeah.
But somehow we still got the ones: don't murder
Right.
and don't steal.
Yeah.
Well, those are,
And even don't bear false witness.
Don't bear false witness, don't lie.
You know you're not supposed to lie.
mm,
And in the legal sense, which I think is maybe the primary way in which that law should be understood, don't bear false witness, is in a legal sense.
yeah.
You still are not supposed to perjure.
Right.
You're not supposed to commit perjury.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's rooted in God's moral law.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the last thing. I know we're going long, but I wanted to ask about the third use of the law. Because if the law is holy and righteous and good, then it should have, and I mean Paul's thrust is that the law is good, and that we shouldn't view it in a negative sense. So the third use of the law, where it's beneficial for the Christian's life, how are we supposed to think about that? I know that the reformers usually divided the law into the tripartite division: moral, civil, ceremonial. But even there, we have some disagreements because neither one of us are Sabbatarians. So even when we look at the Ten Commandments, we would look at the fourth commandment and interpret it differently than just as Israel was supposed to practice it.
Right.
So we don't have to go into an in-depth study, but just kind of hit on that. How should we as Christians? We should view the law as good. We've already established that. But in what sense are we supposed to practice the law? Does that make sense?
And I'll say this carefully.
Right. Yeah,
So-
that's good. That's a good answer.
So I do believe, as Calvin and most of anyone that's connected to Reformed theology, that there is that third use that assists us in our sanctification. But I am
Yes.
sympathetic to Luther's view.
Okay.
Because Luther had a strong law-gospel distinction that he always maintained. He thought it was it's absolutely essential for Bible interpretation, but also essential for your sanctification. And
Right.
what he was worried about is not that the law is good, but because of our own remaining, lingering sin, very easily we can fall into legalism.
Right.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Even as converted believers, we can fall into legalism. Or
And by legalism, that doesn't mean doing the right thing, obeying God.
right.
It means just going through external motions to
Yeah.
earn righteousness.
or falling back into the belief that God is pleased with me and I'm acceptable to God based on my law keeping.
Right.
Even
Because it's
Christians-
good to obey. I mean,
Yeah.
don't murder.
Yeah.
It's good for you to obey that law. That's not legalism when you say, I'm not going to murder someone.
Right.
That's not
Yeah.
legalism.
Right.
But if you say, because I haven't murdered someone, I'm
good.
I'm right in God's sight.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we need to be careful of that because we can easily, even maybe after a period of not doing that, can fall into that and then say like, I'm better than that person because
Right.
I keep the law
Right.
better than that person. So it can make you can fall into self-righteousness, or you can fall into despair if you're looking into the law, like law, and that's all you're looking at. But there is a third use that I think is beneficial, and that's like the logic of it for me anyways. It could be different maybe for you is this. If I'm to be conformed into the image of Christ, which is where we're going, right, in chapter 8, we'll get there. If that's God's goal in the gospel, is not just to save me from hell, but to actually make me a righteous person, to make me like his son, then I need to ask the question, how did Jesus live? And he came to fulfill the law,
Right.
and he lived the law perfectly. So now I can look into the law, and you can use it like a mirror. You go to a mirror, and it tells you, if you've got a smudge of dirt on your cheek, and then you take the washcloth and you wipe it off. So you look into the law, and it shows you like where is there still lingering sin in your life, and where do you need to be conformed into Christ's image? And then you don't try to use the law, right? You use what has been given to you, which is real power, which we talked about for weeks, our union with Christ, and we understand we don't live by serving the letter of the law. We are transformed by a life in the Spirit. And so we look to the law, we see our sin, we confess our sin, and we repent. But coming with the repentance is not a grit your teeth and get past it. It's a asking that God would empower you to leave this sin in your life. And we have a time of corporate confession of sin, and that's really all we're doing. If the Christian life is a life of repentance, well, how am I going to keep repenting if I'm not using God's law to show me what I need to repent of?
Right.
And so there's that third use. But it is something you should be careful of.
And I think it requires thought. I think a lot of us want to be lazy.
Right.
We just want it to be. We just want to be spoon fed.
Yeah.
And we do have to do some work because we are crossing. We're crossing a big divide. We're not in the culture that Israel was 3,000 years ago.
Right.
Right. So we have to do some work to understand the civil aspect of the law is not. It's not going to necessarily be a 1-to-1 because my ox is not going to gore somebody because I don't have an ox. Right. What does that mean? If I have a dog, I keep him on a leash so that he doesn't bite somebody.
Right.
Right. That's kind of the aspect.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you're caring for other people by taking care of your property. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we need to also remember and not live devoid of the Spirit, because the Spirit, using the law, reveals all kinds of things to us that aren't explicitly spelled out in black and white.
Right. Yeah.
So, maybe not being too specific, but let's say something's going on with school with, a teacher and your kid, and you talk with the teacher and they say something or whatever, and what they say, maybe in this regard, you might know something more than they do, than even the teacher. Now, you could, in front of the principal and the teacher and your daughter, your kid, you could embarrass the teacher.
Right.
And you could assert your knowledge over them. And you may want to do that.
Yeah.
And I know I've wanted to do that.
No.
Yeah. But then
that's a surprise, Jay.
Then the Spirit of God is in operation, and so you keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Now, it's good that you kept your mouth shut, but why did the need to assert your dominance and your intelligence
Right.
and the want to embarrass
Mm.
someone, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Now you start tracing these sins
Mhm.
to the
back,
root.
back to your heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to the root.
Uh-huh.
And so even in the things that aren't spelled out in black and white, the Spirit is at work in you with the law,
Yeah.
showing you where you need work.
Yeah. It's probably where the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5
Yeah.
is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Like viewing things through love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Right.
Like where those are all heart issues,
Right.
right? Those are all things that spring from the heart.
Yeah. I mean, anger. Anger is a good one. Like, say
Mhm.
someone really offends you or offends your wife in front of you,
Yeah.
and it provokes you to like a real anger.
Yeah.
That can get close to murder,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, that's where it springs from, right?
Yeah, and it may be murder. Maybe you have a murderous hatred that sparked up out of nowhere. Now, you never acted on it. You didn't blow up in anger towards somebody.
Yeah.
But where God wants to get us is to where that doesn't happen anymore. That's what I'm hoping for in my life, that when I get to old age, my great grandkids, they would not know the person they're looking at looks nothing like the person who has to battle against being angry
Right.
or being easily offended.
Yeah.
And that's the work that the Spirit does. But the Spirit is at work in our life like that because the law is there
Mm.
and is an assistant to us to
Right.
help us.
Right. Yeah.
I
Okay.
know that explained the third use.
I mean, books have been written on this.
Yeah.
Right. We could have lengthy conversations about this, and it's an ongoing work.
Yeah.
Right. It's ongoing conversation and thinking through these things. I think a lot of it is that we don't know what the Old Testament says, so we don't even know how to approach it.
Yeah. The law of the Lord is good, reviving the soul. So I don't want to be the Christian who goes to the law and all it does is make me sad and despair because I'm
Right.
such a sinner, which is
Right.
true. But
Yeah.
that means you're not looking at Christ enough.
Mm.
You have to be looking at Christ and saying and speaking the gospel. I don't want to use the Christianese, but you do have to preach the gospel to yourself
Yeah.
every day.
Christ is the blessed man of Psalm 1 who meditates upon God's law day and night.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He came to fulfill the law.
Yeah.
So he delighted in it.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God he died under the law for us. Right.
Yes. What a long podcast we did today.
That's fine.
Hmm.
It's fine.
All right.
All right. Well, next week we will finish out chapter 7
Yep.
Right.
Indeed.
with the controversial. Is this pre or post conversion, Paul?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you got that figured out.
Yeah. I think
You got
so.
that. You
I
got that
think
figured
so.
out.
Yeah.
So that'd be good.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully this was a helpful, beneficial conversation for you. Of course, there's more that can be said, but that's what we continue doing as we study God's Word, as we have conversation together, as we are involved in the local church. We're doing theology together, and we are being sanctified so that we become more and more conformed to the image of Christ. And that is the purpose of this podcast. So please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. We will see you next time. If you haven't listened to Jay's sermon yet, go and check that out. Download the Christ Fellowship Church Lawton app. Get all this good stuff on it. All right. Well, have a good week. We'll see you next time. God bless.